You can take any other non-porous base also, like canvas, glass, ceramic, any base that you have for practice. Fine. Second most important material that we need is resin and hardener. This is MDF. It's a wooden MDF base. Okay. So second important thing that we need is resin and hardener. Now we all have used resin and hardener in our daily life some or the other time. So you must be thinking where. So we all must have used M-Seal or Eraldite. That is also a type of resin and hardener. But M-Seal is in solid form. Eraldite is in liquid form, but it is not clear. So that's the reason we don't use it for art purpose. So the resin that we use for art purpose is super clear and is known as epoxy resin. Okay. So when you buy your resin, it basically comes in two parts, resin and hardener. You will never get resin separately or hardener separately. Which resin? You can buy any company resin. That's what I'm coming to next. You can buy any company resin, but there are few points which you need to check before you buy your resin. Okay. So first is it should be a casting or a coating resin. Why casting coating resin? If you take casting coating resin, it remains clear for many years. So if you see this poster, you can see me through it. You can see the transparency. For that purpose, you need a casting or coating resin. Now, whenever you buy resin, there are few instructions on the bottle. So the first instruction says that you need to mix your resin and hardener in a specific ratio. So talking about my resin that I'm going to use, it says that I need to mix 2:1 ratio. I'm going to use today Eporex company resin, but I use different company resins like Jax, Chemic Soul, Fortune Chemi. I'll tell you how you can select your resin. Okay. So Tasneem, you just need to explore the world. Like, even Amazon has it. Even the next door stationery has it now. All right. So, but still, I'll be sharing the vendor details from where you can buy the reasonable, materials and everything. Don't worry for that. So, I was just talking about the points that are there on the bottle. First point is it says is there how much quantity you have to take your resin and how much you have to take your hardener. So, different companies have different ratio. Stick to the ratio mentioned on your bottle. So mine is 2:1. So I need to take 2 parts of resin and 1 part of my hardener and mix it. Second point it says is how much time you have to mix your resin and hardener to get a proper mixture. So my bottle says that I'll have to mix around 3 to 4 minutes. Okay. Some bottles or some companies may say that you have to mix for 6 to 8 minutes. Then do that. Okay. Third point, which is the most important point while selecting resin, is pot life. Now, what happens when you mix your resin and hardener? It remains in liquid form only for some extent, at least some time. So that time is the only time wherein you can work with your resin and create pattern or add anything into it. So it's known as workable time or pot life of your resin. Okay. So that's what I was just talking about, that I select my resin depending on my project. So the resin that I'm using today has pot life of only 25 minutes. So once I mix, I need to finish my project within 25 minutes. Now, when I'm doing bigger projects like 5 feet, 6 feet, 25 minutes will not be enough. So that time I select the resin that has pot life of around 60 to 90 minutes so that I get enough time to work on it. Okay. I hope I'm clear till now. You can just give me a thumbs up or yes in the chat box. All right. So we just discussed about the ratio of mixing, minutes of mixing, pot life, and then last important point comes is the curing time. So curing time is the time basically after which even if you touch your piece, your fingerprints will not come on it, and it has it has dried out completely and you can functionally use your piece. So that is the curing time. So talking about my resin, my ratio is 2:1. Mixing time is 3 minutes. Pot life is 25 minutes and curing time is 24 hours. So if I make my piece today, I'll have to wait for it to dry for 24 hours. Okay. So this was all about resin that you have to check before you buy, that you have enough time to work with it and the ratio. Third thing we need is a blowtorch. So this is a blowtorch. Okay, it has a button which you press and a flame comes out. So what happens when we mix resin and hardener, sometimes the air gets trapped and it will lead to lots and lots of air bubbles. If you do not remove that air bubbles, your surface will not be flat. It will have small pits. थोड़े थोड़े खड्डे आ जाएंगे and it will just spoil the the beauty of your piece. So in order to get rid of that air bubbles, we use this blowtorch. If you don't have blowtorch, you can go ahead with heat gun, or you can even use lighter, or you can even use isopropyl alcohol spray, easily available in the medical shops. Okay, so I have given you all the alternatives possible and easily available. Fine. So we just discussed about the base, resin, and blowtorch. Now, if you see the pieces here, you can see the difference. Yeah, rubbing alcohol is isopropyl alcohol itself. Here you see there are different shades. Okay, if you see here or here, each has different shades. So you need to add something to your resin that will just color up. Okay, so we use pigments to just add into the resin to color it up. Now pigments can be in form of paste, it can be in form of powders, or it can be in form of liquid or alcohol ink. You can use dryer, but it should have the hot air, then only the bubbles will burst. Okay, so the pigments are made in a paste form or powder or liquid form. They are quite expensive. So when you are still learning the medium, it is quite, like a big investment. So what I suggest to all my beginner participants, don't invest in all the shades of pigments available in the market. Use maximum, make use of this acrylic paints that you get, not in your resin but on your base, and then just mix clear resin and hardener, pour it, and use one pigment for beach theme, that is white pigment, wherein we need to create the waves. So in this way you get a lot of option to paint your base and have colorful base. Fine. I'll be doing a practical thing, so don't worry, you'll see how to do it, but I'm just explaining. So once you are very much comfortable handling resin, then definitely go ahead and work with the pigments. These are the main things we need to start our resin work. I hope my voice is clear and I'm visible to everyone. All right, great. Those who are not able to hear me or see me, you can just leave and join back. Fine. So we just discussed about the minimum materials that we need to start an experiment with the medium. Base, resin, blowtorch, pigments. Only one pigment I'll be using, that is white, acrylic colors. And we need small things like cup and ice cream stick to mix our resin and hardener. Resin is a chemical, so it's very much important that you do not experiment with it without gloves or mask. Okay, because you don't know your skin type. So better to be on safer side. All right, so this was all the gyan that I had to give you. Now let's just move. I'll be turning my camera towards the table and we'll be starting with the practical thing. So for today, I'm gonna use my black acrylic color at the sand part. As you see here, this has golden color at the sand. I'll be using my black color. Okay, and for the water part, I'm using blue. You can use any shade of blue. So I'll use this blue and mix a bit of white. Masuma, actually respirator is needed when you work approximately 3 to 4 hours on daily basis. Otherwise, as you are just beginner or working for 3 to 4 hours in a week, N95 mask is also enough. I'm not wearing right now, otherwise whatever I speak, you will not be able to hear me. The reason why we need to wear mask is You know, when we heat, sometimes the resin may get burnt and it releases fumes which we don't want to inhale. Fine. All right, let me just turn the camera. In case you have any questions, you can just type it up in the chat box. Syed will help me, or I'll just come back to it once I turn my camera. Okay. Yeah. So I am just gonna start with my sand part first. That is black. So just take your paintbrush and you decide how much portion of this piece you want as your sand. So here I'm just gonna make this much portion as my sand. So just go from left to right and see all the edges and corners are nicely covered. Okay, now I'll just wash my brush and we'll be taking different color, that is blue. Now we all know that, you know, as our water goes deeper, it gets darker. So I'll be starting with the lighter shade, that is white. And after white, I'll add my blue color. Just see that you do not mix black and white, otherwise, you know, your shades will go wrong. So I'm just taking my white acrylic color and going again from left to right. Just add a very small part. Now without washing your brush, for the first color, I just took this white. Now I'll not be washing my brush, and without washing, I'll be taking my second shade, that is cerulean blue. You can take any shade, you can take even ultramarine blue or teal blue. Now I'm just merging my blue with the white. Just mix, 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 blend, and then slowly start moving up. Sorry. Same thing. Again, take the paint, blend, blend, blend here. And then go up. And finally finish up here. Now what you have to do is start from top, come till the end of your poster so that you get a very good blending and no separate lines. The colors should merge nicely. I'm just taking a very little water as my white has dried out. And again go from bottom to top. Okay. So here we have a shaded part from light to blue. Okay. Yes, I'm using acrylic colors and I'm using MDF as my base. Gloves are needed because resin is actually a chemical. So if your skin is sensitive, it may just be allergic. So better to be, you know, on safer side. Why to take risk? So you can get the gloves. You can get gloves from the medical shop easily, and you can use a reusable or one-time use, whichever you get. Fine. Now we will be just leaving this piece to dry for some time. Until the time this dries, we will quickly start and measure our resin and hardener. Now, before I start measuring my resin and hardener, if you see the pieces, these are all the pieces that I have made, which are still left to be finished from the back side. But you see the back side is super clear. There are no resin droplets or, any of the spillage. So that basically comes when you calculate your resin according to the size of your base so that you get a very accurate quantity and there is no wastage. Fine. So that calculation we will be looking in further session. Right now, I'll tell you that for this piece, I need 12 grams of my resin and hardener mixture. So now comes the theory part that I told you. My resin is 2:1 and I need 12 grams. So what I'll do is I'll take 8 grams of my resin and half of it, 4 grams, as my hardener. So the ratio will come to 2:1. Fine. So let's just begin. Let me just wear my gloves. If your ratio is 3:1, then it will go 9 and 3. According to that, you'll have to calculate. Riju, I think there's some issue from your end. All right. So we need a weighing scale. This is the weighing scale that I am using. Yes, Shilpa, that's what I said that I'll be teaching in the further session. Right now, it won't be possible to cover up in this small session, but definitely I'll be teaching you how you can do for irregular shape, how you can do for the trays, how you can do for a mold, and how you can do for a coaster or a wood that you are using. Okay, everything will be taught to you. But one session is not quite enough for everything. Fine. So let me just turn the camera once again. We'll do that later on. Rashu will share it, okay? So here I have just placed the cup. You need to switch it on and take your resin. So this is my part A, which says resin. I'll take 8 grams. Resin is very thick and hardener will be very liquidy. So be very careful when you pour it. Okay, I have 8 grams of my resin. Now I'll take half of it, that is hardener. All right. So we have our required quantity of resin and hardener. Let's just keep this on side. Now, whenever you take your resin and hardener, make sure the most important thing. Yes, I'm gonna make that wave pattern on the piece that we have painted. So don't worry, I'll be showing you practically everything. Now, when you have taken your resin and hardener in this cup, once you start mixing, the pot life of this will start. Also, when you are mixing, you have to be very careful that you do not mix it very vigorously. Otherwise, you'll end up with n number of air bubbles and you will not realize whether the mixture is ready to pour or not. So mix very slowly, and scrap the sides of your cup as well as the base. Okay. So mix it at the time mentioned on the bottle for 3 minutes. Just keep on mixing and regularly scrap the base as well as the sides of your cup. so that you get a homogeneous mixture. So now what happens, when you take your resin and hardener, as this is a paper cup, you may not be able to see it, but when you take your resin and hardener, the mixture is pure like water, very clear like water. And as soon as you start mixing, it becomes turbid and hazy. Cloudiness aa jayega uske andar. So that means the reaction has started, and you keep on mixing till it turns clear again. Okay, so water to turbid and again back to water. That means your mixture is ready to pour. Sometimes you may have seen people complaining, my piece is not dry even after 1 week, or my piece is very bendy. So that all happens when you do not take proper proportion or you do not mix it properly. So that too can be the reason for your end piece to be sticky or bendy. All right. So my mixture looks good to go now. It's super clear. Again, I can see the base of my cup. Okay, now next point, when you are pouring, make sure that your piece is leveled, and you do not place this directly on the flat surface or your table, because if resin, by any chance, if resin is falling, this piece will get stuck to the table, and we don't want that. So for that reason, either you can take the paper cups or any of such bottles and just place over this. Okay, so your piece gets leveled up, and in case due to any reason if the resin is falling down, you will only have the droplets, your piece will be secure. Now as you have seen my pieces, I basically like adding resin only to the water part. I leave this blank. You can apply varnish or just leave it like this to seal it. Okay, so now let's just go further and quickly add this resin and hardener to the water part. Don't pour completely, add slowly as needed. Just spread and cover all the edges. I hope you all are here till here with me. Wherever whatever I have done, it's quite clear. All right. Just make sure that the edges do not remain dry, because you won't be able to add and cover up the edges later on. So it's very important that you check the edges. They should be covered up nicely. Okay, so my piece is like completely covered from all the area. I have some resin left in which we will be adding the white pigment to create the wave pattern. But before that, we will just use our blowtorch. Okay, turn it towards on and keep it on medium flame and quickly move. So all the air bubbles will just burst out, and we will be having a super glossy piece ready. Fine. Now we will be, what we'll do is, just give me a second. I have another cup. All right. So what I'm gonna do is, this is the cup. It's a used cup. I'm just gonna take some clear resin and I'll add white pigment to it. I have some extra left, so I'm just gonna make very little. In case my edges just dries up, I can add, from this clear resin. So that's the reason I'm not adding white pigment to all the leftover resin. Now I have very little quantity of my resin and hardener mixture here. Don't worry about the black. It's already dried and it is not going to come over our pigment. I mean the resin and hardener. Okay. So now let's just quickly go and add pigment to our resin and hardener mixture. So clean your ice cream stick nicely. And I'm going to use white paste pigment. So it looks like paste. I already told the alternative of blowtorch. You can go ahead with heat gun or isopropyl alcohol spray. So I'm just taking a very little, pinch of this pigment and add it to my resin and hardener mixture, and you can see it just becomes completely white. So this is how you can add your pigment to your resin and hardener mixture. May it be white, black, green, blue, whatever color you want. This is how you just have to first mix your resin and hardener and then add the pigment. Now comes the most important point and important part of the resin art is creating the wave pattern. So now what happens? No, Krishna, I already told you cannot add acrylic color in the resin because they are water based, and resin and water are enemies. I added white pigment. So that's what I explained in the theory that you cannot add acrylic colors in the resin. You can definitely use to paint your base. Otherwise, your resin gets told you can use powders, you can use paste, you can use alcohol ink or liquid inks. Fine. So just one second. Yeah. Moving further, I was just telling that this is the white pigmented resin that we have ready, but to have a proper cell effect, I need to wait for this to reach the consistency of honey or sugar syrup. As you see here, the droplet falling is just breaking out. So if I use this, I won't get cell effect, I'll just get a cloudy effect. And I don't want that. So in order to have a proper cell effect, I need to wait for at least 5-10 minutes for this pigmented resin to thicken up. So till that, you can just ask all your questions in the chat box and Syed will take it further. And we are still